Hey, what's up, everybody? Today we're looking at a brief history of everyone who ever lived, the human story retold through our genes by Adam Rutherford. Adam Rutherford is a geneticist, an author, and the president of the British Humanist Association. And I think these few facts actually give you a pretty good idea of what this book is like. This is a book that I bought quite a while back and just never got around to reading it until now, and I'm kind of wishing I'd read this book sooner now. Something told me that this book was going to be fairly mediocre, but I'm happy to say that I was wrong about that. I'm actually surprised that this book hasn't received more attention. In my opinion, A Brief History of Everyone Who Ever Lived is just as good as something like The Gene by Siddhartha Mukherjee, who actually wrote the foreword for this book. A Brief History of Everyone Who Ever Lived doesn't contain a lot of new information, but it's like a combination of the many books that we've seen on this channel on this topic, and it's the content as well as the execution that make this book good. There's stuff in here about archaic Homo sapiens populations crossbreeding and migrating, spreading across the continents, mixing with Denisovans and Neanderthals, picking up traits along the way like lactase persistence. And there are plenty of references to giants in the field, Svante Pabo, David Reich, and Johannes Krause, all of whom I reviewed and loved on this channel. There's a lot in here on heredity, as well as the dangers of inbreeding and the folly of racist ideology. Mostly what makes this book so interesting are just the facts about genetics in general, with a special focus on clarifying misconceptions. So many books focus on what the new science of genetics can do for us, but this one gives a lot of attention to what genetics doesn't do for us. I think this is so important because often when newer sciences are coming into the public awareness, certain types of people get a hold of them and start making wild, unscientific claims, which people may often be all too ready to jump on board with. We've seen this happening very badly with quantum mechanics. It's shocking how many people are taking and running with the mysteries of quantum mechanics and trying to sell nonsense ideas. And I'm especially grateful to Rutherford for this book because if you're like me, you really like to read about genetics and you've encountered a certain term many times. This is an idea that's been receiving a lot more attention lately by serious scientists as well as quacks and charlatans, and that's the subject of epigenetics, which is the idea that environmental factors can alter the gene expression and that these alterations are heritable. If you're thinking this sounds like Lamarckian evolution, it does. And it's been shown to be wrong, but it turns out that there may be some truth to these ideas. Rutherford warns the reader to exercise a lot of caution when approaching a relatively obscure field like this because it's the perfect grounds for quacks, unscrupulous salesmen, and naive hopefuls. Rutherford states unequivocally that there is no room in science for nonsense or mysticism. If science is wrong about something, it's science's job to identify and modify the error, but not to throw together interesting ideas to try to sell something. I have personally resisted studying epigenetics until we find out more and have a much better idea of how these concepts work or not. And as a reader, a student of genetics or biology in general, it was nice to finally see my suspicion affirmed in print by an expert. This book is great for readers who want a better understanding of how the genes that make us who we are work. In depth concepts are covered like the differences between introns, pseudogenes, and the so called junk DNA. This book also features something I really love, a glossary, although it's inexplicably a couple pages shorter than it could have been. That's a missed opportunity, but at least that has a glossary. And as I mentioned earlier, this book has a focus on helping readers to understand misconceptions and things that genes don't do. Rutherford covers the reasons why heredity tests may not be all that they're cracked up to be. And another thing I really like that I've only seen in a couple of genetics books is addressing the claim that you're descended from somebody of great importance thousands of years ago. That's great, but everyone is, as Rutherford explains, not necessarily through genetics, but simple mathematics. The somewhat tricky subject of heritability is covered, and we also look at the Human Genome Project and discuss that stain on human culture that is eugenics. He also covers what kinds of genetic features we might expect to see in outliers, such as mass murderers, and you might just be disappointed. He likens using genes to make behavioral predictions to phrenology, which was the outdated idea that we can make determinations about a person based only off of the bumps and the shapes of their skull. This is not to say that behavior isn't to a degree genetically determined, just that genes are far too complicated to be able to just say, oh, you have this gene, therefore we expect this. Genes function in the gene environment, which includes all the other genes in that environment, influenced by all of the personal experience of that person and the actual environment. And often, one trait is just the phenotypic expression of a multitude of genes existing together in a novel way, or maybe in a non-novel way. It's just that it isn't such a simple matter. Rutherford covers some of the limitations and expectations of genetics and science in general. A big part of this book is critical thinking, genetics edition, and this is one of the things that makes this book stand out among some of the other popular genetics books I've read. Now, before I sign off here, I do just want to say real quick, I want to thank each and every one of you who has watched one of my videos. I sincerely appreciate you taking your time to do that, and I know how precious time is. It's something we can never get back. So thank you for that. I love making these videos, and especially reading your comments. Nonfiction may not be as popular as fiction, but there are people out there who love this stuff, and I'm proud to provide a place for those people, as small as that place may be. That being said, you may be noticing a slight decrease in my output on this channel. I love reading, and I'll never stop. I spend almost all of my free time reading. I spend every lunch break at work reading. When I drive, I'm listening to audiobooks or educational videos, but I don't just do it because I enjoy the act of reading. I read because I love learning. That's the reason I read so much. Learning about our world is what drives me as a person. So I've been spending a lot more time reading textbooks, like school textbooks, and I just can't think of an interesting way to review a school textbook. So if I happen to cross your mind at some point, there's a good chance that I'm reading at that moment, and I will continue to read popular science books, just not quite as frequently as I have in the past. As a matter of fact, I've got a really good looking book that I'm excited to start right now, and it's a totally unrelated field from biology. But after that, I'm going to focus more on school books, at least for a while. Okay, that's it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Genetics is an endlessly fascinating subject. I think it's awe-inspiring that this code where the particular arrangement of four molecules, adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine, plus uracil RNA, produces the entire world of life that we see and have seen, and not just in humans, but all living things. Not to mention all the undreamt possibilities of things we haven't seen yet. To me, that will always be worth the time to read another book. If this is something that interests you, you might want to check out A Brief History of Everyone Who Ever Lived by Adam Rutherford.